Okay, good morning all. The usual notice that this meeting is being webcast for live or subsequent broadcast, and that members of the public or press may record and take photographs except when they are confidential or exempt. I have two apologies, one for Simon Solomon and the other for Kerry Jenkins. Unfortunately, Kerry's come down with a chest infection and has had to be put on a course of antibiotics, so she couldn't make it in this morning. Any other apologies?
It's from James Wagstaff, Head of Enforcement. He can't be with us today. Okay,
declarations of interest. I'm presuming there are none. No. And item 4 is therefore action notes. To confirm the action notes from the meeting held on the 18th of November. Are those notes acceptable? They're confirmed. Thank you very much. There is then the tracker that follows on. Anybody got anything they want to pick up on the tracker?
It's just item 8 and 10 on the tracker. It says information requested, and just wondering if we could chase that specifically.
That's the cost of living crisis. Jonah's been following up on this, so I'll let Fiona comment.
There were a number of items. What I requested onto the work programme from Council Complimentary from the January meeting, so I'm trying to see if we can get the update. I've been forwarding to all of them.
Okay, Jack? Okay, anything else on the tracker? Nope. Then let's move on to the next item, which is to receive an update report on the exempt accommodations scrutiny inquiry, which was conducted under my predecessor, Councillor Carl Rice. Guy, are you going to take us forward on this?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. And in regards to your comments about the length of the report, I apologise, but I'm going to keep my presentation of the report just as an overview, and then have some time to take some questions. Okay,
that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So just generally first, in terms of a sort of summary position, if you recall, when I've been here previously, we've reported on what we've got in place around the inspection and oversight activity. That team continued to deliver that oversight activity, and that is currently funded through the council's funding, which was achieved. We have since then secured, working with Department for Levelling Up, a further 2 years worth of funding running from 2023 to 2025. So we've got secured resources to continue the oversight activity at least for another 2 years, whilst hopefully the regulatory changes needed kick in. It will be at a slightly reduced level than we've had, but we're committed to making sure that the current resources we have for doing the on-the-ground work is retained. Just in terms of the national picture, so following the recent parliamentary select committee evidence gather and reports into exempt accommodation, Bob Blackman MP is currently taking the private members' bill through Parliament. It's gone through second reading, now committee stage, and that is looking to address some of those gaps that we've been highlighting for a while, specifically around introducing greater regulation, setting up a national advisory panel, setting clearer standards around the level of support that is expected from providers providing this non-commissioned exempt accommodation. And two key areas that I think are the critical ones. One is around introducing licensing, for example, introducing the new planning draft James might lose currently he sits outside. So there are still some other areas that we're continuing to talk to leveling up, specifically around the issue of funding for support. But we'll see how that progresses through Parliament and provide further updates as we work. Just in terms of the action plan then, I was just going to focus on those that aren't RAG rated blue, so not completed, and just give an update on those. And then
Just to ensure, Guy, that members understand where we're at, this is Appendix 2. The focus really should be on Appendix 2, which is the update from the recommendations adopted previously.
the ones that are rated blue are those things, so I was going to go through the end ones where there's still activity. So in terms of RO1D, which is around undertaking inspection. As I say, we continue to do that inspection work, and we're achieving a rate with the current resources we've got around 1,000 a year. To achieve 20,000 is going to be over time. That is an intention, but we're targeting that inspection activity where it's needed most, where we get complaints, but also where we have issued guidance through the review process. The approach will continue throughout. RO2A, which talks about having a clear route around complaints. Again, we've got the iCase system, which you're all familiar with, continues to provide the main route for people to raise complaints. We do have, obviously, a dedicated mailbox, which is the one that's in the action plan, which is the PRS mailbox, for people to raise issues. And obviously, that's something we've given out to the public as well. And we've got a process whereby we can capture what comes through the iCase process. One area is still some ongoing work needed, which is around the web pages. We do have a website already. Clearly, there's a need to some of the people from the citywide residents group into what that should be. We're very sort of keen to make sure that people that are going to be using the website feed into how we service stuff to be done. Regards to RO2B and us working with at a more local level with residents groups, we've had for some time struggled to recruit a resident participation officer. I'm pleased to say now that those interviews have concluded and we've got somebody starting in December. So their role will be very much to go out there working with local members, working with local groups to try and sort of support them in understanding the issues and responding to them. We do continue to meet with the citywide residents group, and we've had recent meetings with them recently, specifically focused the last one on consulting on the developing supported housing strategy, and we will obviously continue to work with them. They've been providing an invaluable resource to work with us in terms of, and they've become very knowledgeable around this type of issue. RO3A, the key area of progress here is that I've just mentioned the supported housing strategy, which sets out how, in the interim, whilst we're waiting for the regulatory changes, how we're going to continue providing the oversight work, but also setting out some key priorities. And one of those is about reducing the provision back to being in line with what we've defined as the need. I think I reported at the last committee through the needs assessment, we've identified the need to be around 9,000 units, and we're currently around 23,000 units. So setting some commitments there around over a 5-year period, reducing that provision down to that. A challenge unless we get the powers to do that, clearly. And the strategy is very much focused around continuing with that lobbying piece, but continuing to work with levelling up around RO4C, which talks about the benefit review process and aligning the inspection work around that. So as I said previously, that is where we're focusing some of that joint inspection activity. What clearly we've not been able to achieve with the resources that we've got is for adult social care and our inspection team to go out at every single instance and every single claim. So again, that's a more targeted approach. Our generic inspectors are always the first ones in the door. If they identify through that there's an issue around the support is not as appropriate as it should be, or it's not being provided, there will then be a follow-up inspection by the social work team from adult social care. So whilst they are doing that joint working and continue to do that, it's not in every single case, and it's a sort of risk-based targeted approach. Finally, on RO6, clearly there's still work to be done in terms of some areas of lobbying. We've got some good progress going through the bill, but there are other areas that we need to retain a focus on. And a couple of those, and Councillor Thompson might want to come in and add, is around, as I mentioned, the funding for support and how that is going to be addressed. And also this issue about how referrals are made and where they're made from, and some tighter controls over how referrals, especially for out of city, which at the moment there's no real protocols in place around. The final points around the recent council motions and the covenants, and Janie, I want to come in on this one. So I think there's been some progress made from property services in terms of looking to introduce a clause within the leases for the non-domestic properties, that the non-city council dwelling properties, to ensure that they can not then used for exempt accommodation. We've already got covenants in place for the right to buys that go to our council houses that go through right to buy, that states that they should only be used as a single family home. But I know that yourself's going to be presenting something to the leader in January.
Yes. So if I may, Chair. So the position is actually legally quite complicated. So it is going to require a council policy in order to enforce covenants that we do have, and we have to look around the enforcement responsibility as well. The reason for that being a number of the issues that are being raised with me at the moment by elected members. Some of them date back to right to buys that were done about 30 years ago, and the wording in the covenants is vastly different 30 years ago than what it is more recently that Guy has made reference to. So we do need a bit of a policy review on exactly what is our response, and enforcement of a restricted covenant as well also comes with a lot of legal challenges in law. So as the legal services, we need to identify the most suitable directorate to give us instructions in order to do this. And there needs to be a decision about whether that appropriate directorate is housing or it's city operations, where the vast majority of our enforcement instructions come from. We also have to look at value for money. We also have to look at most circumstances on an individual basis as well. In terms of the use of the property, we also have to look at the roles and responsibilities of other agencies that are working in the community, so that we don't duplicate the work, for example, of the Community Safety Partnership or the police, but we actually complement and work alongside as well. So it is quite a challenging legal landscape in order to deliver on the council motions from December 21 and November 2022 quite quickly. But it is something that I've picked up, something that I'm prioritising. I have spoken to Deborah, Chief Executive, about this as well, and we'll be discussing with CLT to get a corporate-wide approach to it. I'm happy to bring an update to a future meeting, Chair, that's this, but it is a bit of a legal minefield at this moment in time.
Okay, thanks for that. Does that complete your comments, Guy?
Yeah, thank you.
Just before bringing others in, I've got a number of people who want to come in, just so that we all know. For those who haven't been on Coordinating O&S before, the timeline of all of this was that Coordinating O&S discussed this issue of exempt accommodation for a period of maybe a year and a half or so. A report went to council on the 7th of December 2021. That's Appendix A in the papers today. There has been an update to the recommendations, and if you look at then Appendix 2, you see the original recommendations, RO1, etc., but then there were updates, which you get into the penultimate column on the right-hand side of those sheets, updates which came in March, in June, and in November as a consequence of myself and Guy sitting down with Fiona and going through the updates up to then, and therefore putting together some further updates, which you see listed as against November 2022. So that's the background to how we've got here. And really, what I don't want to do is focus on anything other than Appendix 2 and the position that Guy has taken us through. Sharon, is there something you want to comment on?
And I was just going to say, I know that we're supposed to be coming here for a period of time, but I would welcome you continuing with exempt accommodation because it's such a big issue across the city. And I can't see us getting, whilst the government are saying that they will make changes, I can't see it happening anytime quickly. So I think it's really important that this continues to be back clear. Guy did touch on the point around out-of-city referrals, and that's something that does give me huge concerns because we have relationships across the West Midlands and people that are tied into the Charter of Rights and stuff. But again, nationally, other associations that are referring you do have concerns about that, and other local authorities, because they see Birmingham as a place where there is properties around exempt accommodation. So hence why they may want to send people here, which is just not acceptable. And just in relation to what Jamie said in regards to the motion, and I know this is something separate, Albert, but my point of view, in full council, we did make a commitment to members that we would bring back and update the members in a certain period of time. So I'm expecting that officers will briefing out to all members across the chamber in order to just to give an update on where they are now. I understand that there's complexities when it comes to the legal aspects, but members need to be kept informed on what's happening and have an opportunity to ask questions.
Thanks for that, Sharon. I'm going to bring in members. I've got almost every member of the committee who wants to come in at this point, so I'm going to start at the far end and just work my way round. Who's first up the bottom? Was it Alex?
Chair, so it's two questions for me. So the appendix is very useful. Of course, it's the temptation is to focus on the ones that are not green and amber. But specifically, just wanted to ask if any incidents that have been reported to the police have been tied into any work that's being done, for example, any crime reference numbers or any sort of issues just in terms of community safeguarding, whether that's been taken into consideration. And secondly, on the matter of the covenants, is that just specifically on exempt housing, or will that be transported across for other across the rest of the city?
Question in terms of
Probably be better, Guy, because I think they'll be of a different nature.
In terms of the police one, we do have a seconded officer onto our exempt accommodation team, and that has remained with us. So there is direct links between the police and then being operationally on our team as well. Community safety are a key part of the team as well. So we do have regular updates come through. I think next week John Cotton himself. The team in terms of the community safety aspects. We do see things that are being flagged up that can be concerning at times, but obviously because of the nature of it, there's a limit to how much we'll go to the police will say around different cases. Feeding in operationally and into the strategy and into the updates that you see before you.
And then into the licensing and the applications for particular individuals. And that will be tied into any applications for any licenses?
no, so they're not part of the assessment of the initial application. Obviously done by exception, but where just to expand on what Councillor Thompson was saying. So the police, seconded police resource are there to support the inspection activity, which, as I say, is very much kind of a targeted one where we receive complaints, where we know there's issues. The value that the police resource has brought in is the access to police intelligence that they can access. So there's cases it looks at, and if it's a needs of the town.
The regulations around it of what they can and what they're supposed to be looking for when it comes to assessing the claims, which unfortunately that doesn't tie into it if it's not seen as a commission service, it's just housing benefit.
Alex, does that deal with the points that
Just the first and then for the second around,
My understanding on the covenants is specifically in regard to future users exempt accommodation. Okay.
A couple of questions. First of all, there was a lot of talk at the time of the inquiry about there potentially being organised crime involved. And I just wondered whether there's any update on that. Secondly, where there are significant problems and you actually have a cooperative or cooperating provider, the sort of default thing is them just to move the resident elsewhere. Now, that may be great for my residents in Acots Green that person gets moved off to Stockton Green, but the issue is likely to recur in Stockton Green. So is there some sort of system whereby we can actually track what's happening and check that the support is being provided to that individual to try and stop that behaviour, rather than them just being moved from one part of the city to another part of the city? Because obviously, while at the point at which someone moves out of my ward, or my residents might be happy, but equally someone's likely to come in, if it's just churning people round.
I'll answer the second one first, if that's okay. So, yes and no. And I know that's kind of not a clear answer. There's no requirement for the provider to tell us where people are moving, and the provider will have properties all over the city, and through an intervention that we make, they may move that person to them. There's no requirement on that provider to tell us that they're moving that person and where they're moving them to. We would like there to be. Where we've got good providers that work with us and share that information, then yes, we make sure. But this kind of all goes back to the lack of control that we as a council have on how these things operate. All we've got in terms of a power around that is through that housing benefit process. So clearly, we'll know that a new housing benefit is being made at a new address. There's not a requirement that they declare that their provider has moved them from that and a previous address to that one. So yeah, these are some of the kind of, through the regulations, we need those sort of things tightening up. And referrals generally, just new referrals coming in, we don't know where they're coming from. There's no requirement for them to tell us where they're coming from. And it makes that kind of risk assessment process really. Hence things like quality standards and signing up to and adhering to that. That kind of gives us
with that, Roger?
Well, on the organised crime issue.
So clearly, as we said, we've got a seconded police officer, and they were brought into the programme specifically because of the issues the police was raising around organised crime. So you may have seen through some recent articles, I think, in the Inside Housing and another one where we provided them with some sort of case studies. That there are intrinsic links between.
Not quite there, are you yet, Roger?
Well, I mean, it's
on another go.
Yeah, I mean, sort of on the basis that you're saying, well, there are those links. So what do we do about it, I suppose?
Yeah, and obviously the links, the things that we find then gets fed throughout police resources, through into West Midlands Police then. Go away and come back with any things like
I think you need to do that, Guy. Otherwise, I don't think Roger Harmer is going to be particularly confident that he's got the answer he's looking for. Fiona wanted to make a point there.
I just wanted to make a connection with the discussion at the recent Health and Adult Care Social Scrutiny Committee. There was a presentation for substance misuse providers and commissioners, and the link with exempt accommodation was made. And at the next meeting, the Adult Safeguarding Board will be attending. So there was a note made at that meeting to raise this issue, not specifically around exempt accommodation, but there is a connection there around exploitation, substance misuse. So the questions can be asked of the other.
Our question is around inspections. You've got 20,000 units and we are going to carry out 1,000 every year. How many inspectors we got? And in the last few years, the phenomenal increase we have got. I mean, in the next few years, if it carries on that level, we could have 30,000 units. And as it is, 20,000 to 8.5 years. Us from these exam accommodations, the neighborhoods, people living there, they can't bear this for a long period of time. And my other question is, while these providers are making, huge sums of money, is there any way we can levy some sort of money on them to raise more money while they're making such a huge sum of money and use their money to recruit more inspectors?
Just in terms of that, it's just about being clear, it's a housing benefit, and even at times when we claw back money, it doesn't come back to the council, it goes back to the DWP ultimately, because it's housing benefit. The part about whether we should be asking the providers to sort of give us money or help us to recruit more, that's just something I personally would want to be going down the route of, because some of the providers are not operating in a way to be, we have to be careful about where we stand and what our role is in all of this. The clear thing is the regulator we need to have a tighter relationship with the regulator, and the regulator needs to do more in regards to the registered providers. But in terms of us taking money off them, I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. We need nationally to be funded properly. I think that's ultimately where we need to be. The inspections, I would like to see that there was more inspections, but there's a capacity issue, and that's why we really say to members, if you see something that's going on or the residents reporting, please report it in. Because at the moment, a lot of people talk about it and then don't actually report the property.
Well, thank you. My question is that the exempt property issues are not just housing matter, it's cost cutting across many departments of the city council. I don't know whether you've got that cooperation or not. That really need to be done. Otherwise, I can see a recent example is now I had a planning application for 41 single units supported living accommodation, and the housing department made a comment saying we got surplus capacity, right? And the planning were not taking a notice for that. So therefore, it's crucial. In order to tackle these issues, we need to have some common understanding between inter-departments to tackle this issue. And secondly, these providers are often the middle people, agents, managing companies. But ultimately, the person who is making money is the landlord themselves. So is there any way we can scrutinize both of them? One is fitness for purpose, and whether they're involved in organized crime. So we only can deal with this, tackle that the organized crime issue if we can get ultimately back to the person who is investing the money in that sort of thing.
So the first bit is, yes, we are working across directorates. So that's why we've got the multi-agency team, you've got adult social care, you've got community safety, you've got housing, planning are also involved, housing benefit, legal. So there's definitely that coordination going on inside, and we've got the police. I chair a sponsor board, which is the cabinet members that have different parts of those different functions within their portfolios. We come together and we get an update from the officers, so everyone's in the room. So we're making sure that those conversations are linked up. I think since we've taken that approach, I do think we have seen a significant difference. And we're now seeing that the numbers are starting to taper off, although it's still increasing slightly. The part around, what was the last bit was about?
Not all properties.
The checking of landlords. One of the things that I keep saying at the moment, because I've seen it in my own ward, is landlords seem to hand over their properties for a 5-year time. They sign off the lease and almost walk away from it, and then later on find out that there's something really bad going on in their properties. And we really are sending a call out to landlords across the city that if you sign it off as a lease, you still need to be checking on who's the managing agent and other things that are taking place with your property, because ultimately that is your property. And we've seen some really difficult cases where people have been implicated because of criminality that's taken place in an asset that they particularly own.
And I think just to add to that, we're hoping, and this is something we pushed through the lobbying, we're hoping that introducing the licensing kind of regime around this will allow us to do some of those checks around fit and proper persons, et cetera, et cetera. So it's difficult at the moment because the model, how it works is you register the provider, you've probably got a managing agent, then you've got an individual landlord.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you said earlier that there's 20,000 units across the city, but that the understanding is that there is only a need for 9,000. Is that correct? So this may seem like a really obvious answer, but it's not obvious to me. Who is living in these surplus 11,000 units, and why is the council seemingly not supporting these people to live alternatively? Because if there's only a need for 9,000, then why do we have a surplus of 11,000 across the city? And on the inspections, I've got quite a concern that, so perhaps the concern isn't necessary, but are they proactive inspections or are they reactive inspections? Because I know you mentioned that it relies on members and others to put in those concerns and those complaints. But if they're only reactive, then are we even hitting that 1,000 units a year if you're saying that people often complain about these things but don't necessarily make a formal complaint? I do have an issue with it only being 1,000 units a year and the 8.5 year time it would take to go through all of the units that we have, but I appreciate that there are constraints there. But I am concerned that if they are only reactive, that there needs to be a move to perhaps consider more proactive inspections across some of these units.
It's not just the reactive one. There are some reactive ones which are based on the local community, because obviously there's something called. There's also certain providers, there's certain information that might come through from the regulator. So there is a proactive approach in there as well, and that's more targeted. So what we said was, we don't want to just do targeted, then ignore when members say we've got an issue in my ward and it's creating a problem. We wanted to have a bit of a balanced approach on that. And on the 9th, that's
just on that point, that's something I forgot to mention. Out by our inspection team. Quality standards, which is the accreditation scheme. So when a provider wants to be accredited against that will then bring with it a whole series of checks, including inspection. So those are kind of more sort of proactive. Not question, we've got about 30 plus providers that are going through that process at the moment.
There is another aspect of this which I think you are aware of, and Janie, it's Sajila within who works. Janie, to you, I think, is I can't remember the.
Sorry, I thought there was somebody who was coming.
The work that customer services are doing includes a follow through with landlords, and they are undertaking a static, not investigation, etc. So there is some other work that's going on elsewhere to the work that Guy's team is embarked upon, but it's complementary.
It does all tie back in, and they all keep in contact, because Sajida's well still sits under my portfolio, although it's in a different direction. And it's that difference, it's the confusing difference between some are registered providers, and the others, there are private ones as well, the smaller ones, and those are the ones that the private rented sector will be able to do some of
But the point about this, Sharon, is this is systematic. There's some systematic work going on, looking at those HMO type properties, which obviously will pick up on, because it's simply landlords they're getting to, it will pick up on exempt accommodation properties as well.
Carry on.
Back to the first question. Yeah, just to build on that, so we're just just trying to mirror some of the work that's happened in your share around looking at specific localities and trying to make the targeted piece of work. And just on the point around the numbers then, so yeah, you're right. So we've got 20,000 plus units. Strategic needs assessment and then really looking at, looking at the data that we could access, the quality of data, this is the national, it's really difficult to define true need, it's really hard, but range of data sets, which has come up with the kind of the actual defined need for people in Birmingham is 9,000. So then, yeah, there's 11,000. They're not surplus. So who are these 11,000? You're right to raise the point that this is kind of filling more of a low-level need general housing. So people are actually living in supported housing that potentially don't need high degrees levels of support. And we know that providers are bringing in business from across the country. We know that national probation are referring across the country into Birmingham because we've got the level of provision. So the difference between the 9,000 and 20,000 is need that potentially isn't a supported housing need.
So couldn't it be true then, though, that some of those providers are purposely allowing people who don't need to live in those properties to continue living in them and not supporting them to move on elsewhere because it is not financially beneficial for them? But also, doesn't the inspector issue, doesn't it rely on these providers being cooperative and actually allowing themselves to be transparent and inspected in the first place?
Yes, it does.
And final point, what do we know why there is such a concentration of these types of properties in certain parts of the city?
Primarily, the type of property that you tend to find within larger Victorian house family housing in areas of the city where property values aren't necessarily as high. So it's financially, it's with the landlord to lease a property in an area where there's low value and it's easy to convert. So a 3-bedroom Victorian terrace, you could probably get 5 or 6 plus rooms into it. So that's primarily where you'll see the likes of Stockland Green, where you've got a prevalence of that, the likes of your Wall Council of Thompson, where you've got those types of properties that are potentially low value, can be converted into twice as many rooms as they are today. So that's kind of where you get that.
I'll bring you in, Mick. Alex, I think with hindsight, you feel that you ought to declare an interest.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, so I'm just mindful, of course, there was exemption. I was in the full council, but I suppose for clarity, I should declare that I am an owner of a HMO within Birmingham. So if that could be formally noted, please.
It's safer for Alex to declare that.
And if anybody else needs to, thank you.
The invite is to anybody else.
Shade that so much of the conversation was going to be on this specific issue.
Okay.
So just for the record, should I record that as the pecuniary interest?
It's not,
Yeah.
HMO.
So the fact that you own a property, sorry, Chair, the fact that you own a property within the city, but I'm presuming it's within the city boundary?
Yes.
Yes. So you do have a disclosable pecuniary interest because that's on Schedule 1 of your Register of Interest?
Yes, and it is declared on.
Yes. Yes.
Again, for this meeting's purposes.
So it is a pecuniary interest
Yes.
that you have, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just some questions built on the point that Fiona raised where we discussed substance misuse related issues of last past. I've been to a number of exempt accommodation properties in my ward and also seen a couple of stuff where there clearly are people in there who've got substance misuse issues. I'm talking to users and the actual care providers. I actually don't see any indication in terms of what these care providers are actually doing. Now, I notice here where it says evidence of provision of care or support is not detailed in the regulations, but case law has qualified it as meaning more than minimal, or more than trifling. And I'm wondering what level of support you're going to accept as, well, that's what's being provided in this accommodation. Because as I said, and I'm not, obviously I've only seen a limited number of properties, but the level of support without actually seeing the care plan, assuming there are care plans for these people, and I very much doubt that there actually are. Yeah. What level of support are you actually expecting them to do? Or can I just put down, I'm providing this and it's just accepted?
And this is the debate that we're having nationally around the potential impact on vulnerable people not getting what they need in terms of support, and the requirements within the current regulations to provide that more than minimal or more than trifling, which can be as little as an hour checkup a week. You know, in terms of the HB process, they do ask us to see things like what's their risk assessment, what does the care plan look like. So they've got some evidence that's more than minimal, but it doesn't necessarily require the provider to show that it's delivering the support specific to that person's need. So if they have got substance misuse issues, it doesn't mean that they need to provide people qualified. That's something we've raised in the big bill. That is one of the key areas in terms of looking at defining better what good support looks like. What you pointed out, and I know Björn's raised and they made across the links with health service generally, we've started those conversations and trying to make sure that it's one piece of the jigsaw that perhaps we haven't brought into that multidiscipline, which is the health aspect. So we'll definitely be tying more into that. But as I say, the requirements for them to provide the type of support that we would want to see isn't there. That's why the quality standards we introduced, the quality standard is an enhanced level. It defines an increased standard of support that we expect from good providers. But that's voluntary. So they'd pay the subscription, they would be assessed on their ability to provide a level of support that we think is a benchmark of good quality. And that's where we want to push a lot of our effort to get all of our providers signed up to that particular standard.
A few moments back that the actual provider care plan. So would your workers actually look at that care plan and question about it, or would you just accept that care plan?
Yeah,
as it was?
So the multidisciplinary team, we've got social workers, we've got two or three social workers in the team. So where our initial inspections go out and find there's an issue over, we don't think the support's being provided here, that's when our social work team would go in and do that assessment of looking at the support plan. Does it fit the need? It's fair to say, and you've pointed out, that the level of skills that some of these support providers have is lacking. So we want to do a bit of training with them around that. And we do challenge them on that. But again, it's making sure that we can kind of work with those providers to make sure that they're doing what they can to provide that support. But again, the requirements and it's not detailed in legislation what they can and can't do. We rely on those loose definition of does it get in the hands of benefit pay.
Thanks.
Yes. My question, well, there's two questions around RO2A and C. RO2A says there should also be a single clear route for citizens of both exempt accommodation and the local areas to raise concerns. Now, I have this morning somebody who sent me 6 emails on the trot out of sheer frustration. They've got an exempt accommodation or HM or whatever you want to call it, a few doors away from them.
and they do not know the route to take for them to make the complaints and whatnot. And also on C, there should be a clear route for local councils to deal with casework relating to exempt accommodation. Now, what type of work has taken place on that? Is there a defined route for councillors to approach the officers for exempt accommodation? And is there a clear route for the residents who are affected by the exempt accommodation to follow? Now, I've sent that email on to the enforcement today by the Labour Secretariat. I see you've got one of your officers here. I just want to know what work has been done around these two ANC on the R2.
Well, I think we put it in there. The specific, and to answer your question, the iCase process is the process that we want to push certainly yourselves as members through. So if it's complaints coming through, we need to take you through that corporate process. And the reason for that is so we can effectively track what's coming in and what the numbers look like. So that's where you first got the reason we've put in there as well. We've set up a dedicated mailbox, which is that prs@birmingham.gov.uk, and that goes through to the private sector enforcement team, who then do those checks. Is it a HMO? It goes down one route. Is it exempt? It goes down another route. So those are the two where I'd say for members to direct. Like, similarly for residents to go through the normal complaints process. So we've worked with the contact centre, and it will come directed. As I say, we're building that to make it better. Exempt accommodation in Birmingham or whatever. They'll have clarity there about the whole range of stuff that's going on that. They'll give them links to raise complaints. The normal complaints process that's in place. That's what it's designed for.
My experience with the PRS team and the email wasn't a very fruitful or good one. I can't know that.
Yeah, no, Sajida did say at the briefing session that we had recently about.
No, they are dealing with it now. Yeah.
She has picked up.
Yeah, she has picked it up, yes. Yeah. My concern, can't remember, my concern was that, it took so long for him to pick it up. It was about 3 weeks until I got a reply from the PRS team to my email. And then it makes you wonder, are you guys, the PRS team who deal with it, are they on the board or not? So, of course, there has been improvement, lately. I've saw
What I think has been one of the actions there is about having a clear process around commissioning. So when we are using providers, that we are looking to only those that go through that quality standard process. Some of them process to get through that accreditation. Provider has adopted the Charter of Rights and are going through that QA process. Those are the providers that we'll be targeting. There are instances where, sometimes emergency presentations, and we do have to find providers that those officers know providing good quality services. This whole issue about how, where referrals are coming in and who they're going to and who's accommodating and are they, and again, the licensing and the fit and proper person test, all that will help. But yes, so we do place, I'll give you the numbers, and we do place for those that aren't, we know of good quality.
There we go. I think that was it. I mean, listening to the questions today, we spent a long time doing the inquiry, and listening to today, I was rather hoping that things have moved on. To me, it's sort of.
It's ultimately going to change the law. There's a restriction around how we would want to move on much more quickly than. There are some real legal restrictions around that. And in terms of the resource, at the moment we've got funding, and we are doing as much as we possibly can. But it's a very difficult area given that the council's got very limited levels of jurisdiction over it. The bit that I am always been chomping at the moment is really around where, looking into the Birmingham growth, and that's why we're going to have the separate inquiry just into that particular aspect.
I think for the point, when we started the inquiry, and I'll be brief because I know you want to move on. I think we started the inquiry, the fact was that it could have just been 18 months of action of the government, and that, we could have done that, but there were concrete things that the council could do to improve things that it had. And I wasn't saying that those things hadn't been done, by the way, but what I was trying to say is that we've just got to make sure that we do keep that progress. And I think exempt accommodation was brought in with the best of intentions, but it's failing, and I think we all agree with that, and then does need to be movement. But any movement that's going to be done by the government, the process that it has to go through with the best will in the world is going to take time.
Slowing down, and in terms of the rate that it was growing in Birmingham, it's absolutely slowing down. So, and I would just like to say, Albert, just want to give my thanks to the teams that are working on it, and particularly the community groups that have been working with the council. And also the police and the other sectors that have been supporting the journey to date as well.
I think so, yeah, but as scrutiny, we're a critical friend, aren't we, in our jobs to make sure that journey carries on and keeps moving. And
we are.
I think in response to that point, Ewan, I would suggest that we actually, in terms of the action tracker, which will come out of today, we'll bring this back as an update situation, maybe March or April. That gives 3 or 4 months, and hopefully there'll be some further progress over that 3 or 4 months. Certainly in some of those areas where the city council itself can influence the issues. And I think the team that's working going into exempt accommodation properties and doing follow-up in terms of that, and so Mick's question in regard to that was important. That work is ongoing, and that work at the local level is attempting to deal with some of the ramifications, if you like, of exempt accommodation. The national picture is another matter. That Birmingham is being made the home for exempt accommodation by people across the country is a concern, obviously, but at least, and that has to be dealt with elsewhere, but at least we can deal with some of the issues ourselves. And there is a team under Guy that is active on that. And so I think what we ought to do is come back in March or April and get a further update on the situation. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Having said all that, I think we can now move on, and I am going to be particularly conscious of where we are on the agenda and the time on the clock. So what we have now is an update on the planning enforcement issues arising from that exempt accommodation inquiry.
I'll echo what Guy said originally as well regarding the length of the reports, and I'm assuming the appendices as well, which were particularly lengthy in this case, so apologies for that. I have prepared a brief summary of the report, just to go over what was a recommendation made by the committee, RO5, which looks at ways of strengthening planning controls regarding exempt accommodation, and also address what you consider to be a gap between councillors and residents' expectations of planning enforcement, and the service which was being delivered by the planning department in this area of work. I'm also going to tie up a few loose ends which are also referred to in the scrutiny report. So I'm just going to go through this statement here, and if you've got any questions afterwards, feel free. So in response to the recommendation RO5, the leader and the relevant O&S committee was asked to review existing practices, enforcement policies and procedures, A report was presented to the Economy and Skills Committee during March 2022 by the Principal Enforcement Officer, Mark Franklin. This report covered all areas of planning enforcement, from case investigations, relevant legislation, government guidance, expediency considerations, and how and when formal action is taken, which is all in accordance with the Birmingham Local Enforcement Plan. The committee noted the contents of the report as shown in item 5 of the appendix attached to my report, and a recommendation was made that our biannual enforcement report presented to Planning Committee should be circulated to all members of the council to provide further awareness of the work carried out by the team, and I hope you're all now receiving that. This concluded the recommendation R05 as far as we were concerned, which was made by the committee in the scrutiny review regarding planning enforcement. However, there were a few other issues that were referred to in the report, which I'll address now. Firstly, the effectiveness of the council's practice in containing the growth of HMOs. This was questioned, and while acknowledgement should be given, as you'll all recognise, to the citywide Article 4, in limiting the concentration of HMOs, it's long been established now, which I'm sure you all recognise, that this can have no bearing on the growth of the number of properties used for exempt accommodation. So with that in mind, in order to be as transparent and open as possible with residents and providers about the situation, we have developed a web page which provides a clear explanation of the Article 4 and further guidance regarding the assessment of supported accommodation from a planning perspective. And that legal advice of this assessment, including consideration of the single household test, was sought prior to the publication of this web page. All of the guidance provided online was agreed on the basis of this advice. It has transpired that the vast majority of the type of accommodation that we're looking at in supported accommodation has no more than 6 occupiers. Therefore, it is almost always found that planning permission is not required. This position has now been recognised at a national level, with planning reform being one of the areas considered in the exempt accommodation report by the Select Committee, which is contained in Appendix 2 of my report. Specifically for planning, the reforms recommend the need to close the loophole in the use class order, which would prevent this change of use occurring without the need for a formal planning application. This would then enable local authorities to balance the provision of exempt accommodation with other housing needs and control the density of exempt accommodation in specific areas. Without this change, planning control for this type of accommodation is limited. However, despite these limitations, informal intervention requiring internal alterations to ensure properties meet the requirements of the single household test is still a regular occurrence, with formal enforcement action generally limited to the most extreme cases. For example, Safe Lodge on Sandham Road in North Edgbaston, which had an occupancy of over 25. Properties on Carpenter Place in Hall Green with over 40 occupiers, and Grange Road in Bordsley Green with over 50 occupiers. In total, planning enforcement investigated over 400 supported accommodation properties, and we continue to provide specific support to the multidisciplined exempt accommodation team. And with many more properties due to be inspected and with potential planning reform on the agenda, this support will soon be strengthened, as we are intending to recruit 2 additional officers in the new year who will have specific role dedicated to this challenging area of work. Any questions? Feel free.
Right. First of all was Roger.
Yeah, so I wanted just to sort of flag up an issue that even when we hopefully get changes in the legislation so that planning approval is required, that is not the end of the problem, because of the nature of planning enforcement being potentially such a slow process if the owner of the property plays a system. And to give an example of that, there's a property in my ward which used to be a nursing home, has 36 bedrooms, was advertised in the spring of this year as exempt accommodation without planning permission. Now, because it's got 36 bedrooms, it requires planning approval. So, everything we've been talking about before about the need to get the legislation changed, that's not a problem here. this needs planning approval. And it was being advertised on some of the, the internet sites as, you can have a room for whatever it is, some trivial amount of money because it's exempt. Before it had actually opened, and I spoke to our local senior planning enforcement officer, and they actually went down and spoke to property before it actually opened as in this way, and told them of the need to get planning approval. There were sort of various to's and fro's, and we'll put a planning application in by the end of September. That didn't happen. Further conversations. We'll put a planning application in by the 28th of November. That didn't happen. So, we'll then move on to, or hopefully it's already happened. I've got to catch up soon with the enforcement manager. That actually, a notice is served on, but then they've got the right to appeal that. And the process is just tortuous. So where someone is deliberately gaming the system, they can potentially run a large exempt property for a considerable period of time, and then once the process gets to the end, if the rules turn against them, and I don't see how a 36-bed exempt property in this location could get approval, they just move off and do something else with it, or shut it down from that use and turn it back into a care home or whatever. And they've made a substantial amount of money during that time. So I think we need to, at some point, just look at what we can do to tighten up, speed up the planning enforcement process. And that may need, the city solicitor, who unfortunately has just left the meeting, to take a more, allow a firmer, quicker, more risky, or non-risk averse attitude to pursuing people that flout the planning rules in this sort of way, just so that the potential gains they can make while the process operates don't outweigh the potential costs of them getting caught up by it. So I think that's something we need to look at separately. Maybe, but I just don't think, I think we need to not think, well, if only the legislation can change and they need planning approval, then all our problems are over, because I don't think they will be unless we got on top of the problems in other ways.
Now, if I can just address some of the points, I totally see where you're coming from in terms of timeframes for enforcement. Some of those are set in legislation in terms of the appeal process, and we don't have any control over the length of an appeal. So the planning inspectorate can take 12, 18 months to decide on appeals, and fortunately they have their own issues. But in terms of financial gain, if an enforcement notice is served and not complied with, and they continue to operate beyond that, we do have proceeds of crime that we can go for. So where there is an ongoing breach and they continue to flout that situation, we can apply to the courts for proceeds of crime beyond the end of the compliance period once they're committing a criminal offence. So although they may appear as though they just walk away scot-free, there is that, and I think there are cases where we are considering that, and we've certainly done that for HMOs, but obviously supported exempts are relatively new in terms of enforcement, being 18 months ago. But there is certainly financial repercussions should they continue beyond the end of compliance periods.
I have a similar question on farmer. James, I have the same concerns that the people there who were very smart, very clever, and they play our system up. They play our system really to, I think, to feel as to us and these residents that we are not doing anything, or we are really not taking them seriously. How many total number of breaches, planning breaches in the whole of Birmingham, and how many enforcement actions we have taken? Can I have that figure?
This type of accommodation?
Yeah, and recently, I give you a recent example. Even the Article 4 is being abused. People now coming with ask for lawful certificate of use, of continued use. I read the case, but a number of cases, but recent one, I've seen the electoral register, the same person was living there for about 10 years. And I don't know what evidence the applicant made. And my comments or my objection was overlooked, saying it's a legal test. Yet, in the same report, they're saying to grant a license is a legal test. So how can one legal test is or rules against somebody? I don't know what evidence they're given. It don't make sense to me. If somebody buys from looking outside, if somebody been living there for 10 years, same person, same one single person, and somebody claimed that he'd been used as HMO before the Article 4 came in. So what steps are we taking? First of all, why isn't the conference get the evidence presented to them so we can? Because what's stopping somebody fabricating evidence to the legal department? I have seen that in one earlier case where I did sort that out. But perhaps they made a mistake sending me the agreements. Then I challenged them. I said, I think these agreements are false, and that got rejected. Then they stopped giving me any evidence of what they have to be making.
Let's see if we can get an answer, Sean.
Thank you.
Your first point about numbers across the board, are you talking just about supported accommodation?
And HMOs.
HMOs, yeah. So we have investigated 400 supported exempts. It's kind of set in stone. 99% of those don't require planning permission because of the legalities around it. So the only ones we can take action against are the more extreme cases, which I've referred to a couple, but there are others. And we are serving enforcement notice. But what I will stress is a lot of the work that we undertake is on an informal basis. And there's changes that are made to properties, which you would never see, but they're changes that ensure that those properties fall in line with the requirements that we put forward as far as the single household test. So sometimes we might get properties with 7 or 8 people in, which technically need planning permission. We would intervene, and they would take out two people who were living in the property to reduce it down to 6. That makes it compliant then, as far as we're concerned, as long as it ticks the other boxes as far as providing communal facilities, kitchens and those sorts of things. It operates as a single household as far as the legislation is concerned. And that is currently a lawful use of a residential property. Until the use class order changes, we can't get around that. We have to walk away from those properties. If it meets that criteria, we have to walk away from those properties. That if there are other issues, ASB and crime associated, obviously working with Guy's team, the partner working that we have, those issues are then addressed through that link, and we work together. But we aren't serving many enforcement notice on supported exempt because we legally aren't able to, because they are lawful as far as the current planning regime is concerned. HMOs are a different matter, and the Article 4, I have to say, is generally doing its job regarding HMOs specifically, but there is obviously a thin line between HMOs and supported exempt, and I think a lot of the public can mix the two up, because they do look both like HMOs. It's I say there's a nuance between the two, which a lot of members of the public may not realise, which it's obviously becoming more and more of something that people know about now. So in terms of LDCs, you were talking about people fabricating evidence. That's something that's tested by our solicitors. So it's not just officers who consider the evidence that comes in, it's the council solicitors who would look at it, and we have to take a view on the balance of probability as to whether or not that evidence proves the lawfulness for whatever it is that they're applying for. And on the balance of probability, literally 51% against 49, if that evidence stacks up in their favour, then we would have to support that application. So but it is scrutinised rigorously by our solicitors. If people are fabricating information and fabricating evidence, obviously I'd like to think that is picked up and highlighted at the time, but we can't obviously guarantee that.
Very brief.
Yeah, hearing from my contact. But what's stopping the legal department disclosing accepting the financial law to contract information? What's stopping them giving us the information the applicant is making in support of the application for lawful use?
Councillors?
Yeah. When they send us a notification, why can't they send us like on any planning application, you have supporting documents? Why don't they do? I mean, they already done it once to me. Once I got away with my objection, then they stopped giving.
Little that we can do about that, and I totally get where you're coming from. Other properties are probably less favourable than the HMOs, and it's an easy way to just move across from one to the other. But sadly, the Article 4 may well have increased the number of supported exempt accommodations indirectly because of being introduced, which was never obviously its intention, but that is the indirect effect of it, because that allows people to circumnavigate the Article 4, sadly.
Thanks. Fiona and I were in a short discussion there because we've got some people online and we've lost sound at one stage. Hopefully we've got it back, but I think we've got to the end of consideration of this issue. As I was trying to say a moment ago, the recommendation is simply to comment and note the contents of the report, and that I think we can do. Thanks. You have to come back though to some of the points directly to Councillor Sharman-Lowell.
Councillor Sharman, yeah,
okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. To move this on as quickly as I can now to the next item, which is the Customer Services Programme Scrutiny Task and Finish Group update. We do have one officer here online, and that's Nikki Spencer, who's the delivery manager for digital and customer services, and who has been the officer working with the Task and Finish group in order to bring the reports forward today. Let me first apologise for a succession of reports that were sent your way. The last of the meetings of the Task and Finish group, and we're not yet complete on the first phase of the work, was on Monday afternoon. And so it's been a bit of a helter-skelter journey to get the report on housing, on waste management here for today, but we really felt that we needed to do so. So Fiona did send out to members of the committee late yesterday the most up-to-date version. So if you're focusing in on the work of the Task and Finish group, which is in Appendix B, then please use the version that Fiona sent to you yesterday afternoon, early evening. I'm going to invite members to comment, and then I will invite Nikki to provide answers, because she's got more of the detail in her head or in front of her than I have. I just want to point you to the recommendations that are before you today, because what we're trying to do here is ensure that the customer service improvements that have been flagged up by customer services are implemented. That's recommendation 2.1. In 2.2, we're saying that the Task and Finish group should continue with those 4 services that have recommendations attached to them. The one that the group has not met with senior officers on yet is highways, but that is scheduled. Unfortunately, it was scheduled for before today's meeting, but had to be postponed, had to be rescheduled. And the Task and Finish group will go on and then look at a second phase of activity, or a second area of activity of customer services, who've been taking forward workshops around the culture, if you like, of the authority. And what we want to do is bring forward some of the week, the 13th of December. And what we're asking the O&S Committee to do is to endorse that second phase of the customer services program, because it seems to us on the Task and Finish group that the first phase was about fix the basics. And having got to that stage, it needs to be taken forward in a further phase. Otherwise, what's the purpose of doing phase 1? So we would like to have the endorsement, the Task and Finish group would like to have the endorsement of coordinating O&S to that second phase of the work. If I can just turn to Appendix B, we have a number of pages, one on bereavement services, the second on housing repairs, and the final one on waste management. And what you have is the initial recommendation that came out of the customer services work. In red, you have some updates risen as a consequence of the work of the Task and Finish group. And it really is the updates that are perhaps the important aspect of this, particularly when you come through to housing repairs and waste management, because the updates there show a significant change of direction that is coming through in those services. And what I think we're trying to do as a Task and Finish group, work with customer services to ensure that those changes of direction are implemented. Because if they are implemented, I think the view of the Task and Finish group is there are some transformational changes which could happen, but we need to make sure they do happen. And therefore, the support that we can give to customer services to ensure that they happen could be quite fundamental to the delivery of those services within this city. I would just ask whether there is any comment from Roger was a member of the Task and Finish group and sat in on all meetings. Unfortunately, Ewan is not able to attend. And unfortunately also, Kerry is not here this morning. So I'll start, Roger, by asking you whether there's anything you wish to add to what I've said, and then I'll take comments from other members, and I'll then bring in Nikki to either comment on what members are saying or to comment on what it is Roger or myself have said.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I would just make a quick comment. I mean, there's an awful lot of detail in this, and I've sort of had my go on the detail by sitting on the Task Force group, so I won't go into that, though there's a lot of important stuff in there. What I would say is, I think your comment about this could be transformation is the key thing, because we've been here before, and what was done before was not transformational. We keep getting the same issues and same problems. So the key thing is, will it be transformational, and what needs to happen? And I think we have to accept that needs culture change. This isn't just about, oh, we've got a wrong process, we need to change that process. It's about changing the fundamental culture of significant areas of service delivery in the council. And to achieve that, you need pressure and leadership and push right from the top. So that's what's going to be needed to make a lot of these things happen. And it will also, as part of that, it will need time. And certainly this work will need to carry on till it's 2025 in the Cabinet report, isn't it? I think that is, that's to get through most of what's in here, that will need constant pressure until then. We mustn't underestimate what it will need to change the culture of significant parts of this organisation.
Let me bring in other members of the committee. Deirdre?
Something about the waste management. And first of all, I wanted to echo really what you say about the report coming in late, because I particularly wanted to look at the waste management because that's my shadow portfolio. And yesterday afternoon, in came the report. I got a cup of tea, I sat down, I read it, I wrote my notes, and then the computer was left on. And when I went to turn it off at 6 o'clock to go out for the evening, another version's come in. And I haven't got time to read the next version. It really
Can I just say to you, though, Deirdre, the other version changed only the format from a portrait format to a landscape.
I wouldn't know that because I didn't look at it. So
well, that's what it did. Yeah. So I can assure you that where you took your notes, you could switch them across. It was simply because the first two, bereavement services and housing repairs, are in a landscape format and are much easier to read than in the portrait format.
It's easy to read, yeah, grant that. But it's not helpful that when you've sat down and done something and then something else comes in, and there wasn't time to look at it again. But the bit about the slab in the cab, we've had so many slabs in the cab that I've lost count. And then it begins by saying it's currently used at the driver's discretion. Well, that's completely ridiculous. If you're putting in expensive kit, you can't then say it's used at people's discretion. And one of the main features of the slab in the cab, as far as I'm aware, is a list of the assisted collections. And I'm sure we would all agree that many of our missed collections are assisted collections, which are for the most vulnerable people in the city, and they should be getting the best service, not the worst service. And so if it's a discretion that you bother to look at the list of where the assisted collections are, no wonder we're all in trouble. And then there's another thing it said about it could be used in the future for the depot to tell the wagon to go back while they're still out. They do that anyway. Well, they do in Lifford Lane. I know they do. Because Dave will say to me sometimes, I'm getting them to go back. And I say to all my residents, please tell me as soon as you know it's been left. Because if you leave it till Monday evening or Tuesday evening, it's far more difficult to get them to go back because they are already doing that. I don't know if he does it via the slab in the cab or via a mobile phone, but somehow they're already doing that. So I just think this whole slab in the cab thing, we've been promised this is going to be the answer to everything for years. And unless somebody gets a grip of it and makes them use it, it's not going to work. I won't go any further. I could go on for ever and a day.
Deirdre, the task and finish group entirely agree with you. All right. Now,
Yes.
let me just, I'll bring you in, Ewan, and maybe Nikki wants to comment as well. Please read the comments in red.
Yes, and that's another thing I would like to say.
What the comments in red are the important aspect of the appendix.
Yes.
Because.
Can I also say they're not so easy to read in red? I don't think they're so easy.
That's why we changed it to the
After I struggled with it.
let me assure you, what the task and finish group had, and we had the head of waste management there, Darren Sher. What we had is a total set of assurances that this new kit, and they've called it kit.
Quick crewing cab.
A crew with a K, technology. This kit permanently installed in the cab, but because the driver will be able to input data when the cab is stopped, but may not be able to input all the data. For example, we're told that if they're doing a waste collection round and they find a pile of flight tip rubbish, they can put that information in on kit, which will then be redirected automatically to the fly tipping teams, and therefore you press the button on getting rid of that fly tip rubbish. Now, there are other examples of where it might be used in that manner. We went through all of that with Darren Sher, and he has assured us that the management have been going through a series of discussions, not just with depots, and they've been trying to take the employees in depots through training exercises on this kit, but also they've been working with the trade unions in order to get the acceptance of the trade unions to what are in effect new methods of working. And what will happen is that the kit will only be taken out of the cab, perhaps back at the depot, if they have not input into kit, which has come to them during the round, and they want to therefore get it into the equipment in order that it can then be that data can then be worked on elsewhere, etc. So that's why I say, Deirdre, that if and Roger's right here, if we can make this happen, then it could be transformational. But that's why the recommendations have a very clear statement about us continuing the work, because the intention is for the task and finish group to make it happen. And I think Roger, I may be paraphrasing him here, we need to be on their backs. And therefore, what I'm hoping is that by coordinating O&S agreeing the way forward, that task and finish group will remain on the backs of those who are now tasked with taking forward these changes.
Thank you.
And I'll bring in you.
I understand everything you say. Can I just say something to something you said, which if my residents were sitting here, I'm sure they would say, if the wagon is driving along the road and it sees some fly tipping, rather than putting in a message to get another lorry to come out, why don't they just pick it up and throw it in the back of the van? I expect you'll say that's different ways of working, but I tell you what, my residents would just throw up their arms in horror, frankly, that's not the obvious thing to do. I'm not saying a whole van load of stuff, but the odd television on the road, just throw it in the back.
Culture change.
Mm-hmm.
Culture change.
Deirdre, look, let the task and finish group remain on their backs. Not all fly tip rubbish is in bags and can be picked up. We know that. But all I'm trying to say here is that if we believe I don't know, 50%, 75% of what we're told is going to happen. And we actually sit on their backs to make it happen, certainly in housing repairs and in waste management. This is transformational. Ewan, and I think it was it Shaman?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we need to keep on their backs, and it is down to the crews ultimately. At 11:21, I got an email from a 70 or 8-year-old council sufferer who's supposed to be getting an assisted collection, and the crews are refusing to reverse the wagon down the drive. So they're saying they can't collect his waste. So I'm going to have to look into that. But what seems to be happening here is that I've got assisted collections across the ward not taking place. There was one where they went on the Saturday because the assisted collection wasn't taken. They collected every other house on the street with the exception of the assisted collection. Yeah. And because such a big noise was made about that assisted collection, I think there was a slight point being made there. And I think that quite a few of the assisted collections, they come on to ask me to do it. They're upset about it. About the collection, and they also feel that they don't want to put me out, if you know what I'm trying to say, because they're constantly on. But yet they go on to customer services and they get an email reply to say they'll be back within 15 days. That's no use. I'll speak to the depot, and the depot will say, we've spoken to the crew that's going out this morning and they will make the collection. I'll get an email at 11 o'clock to say the crew's just gone sailing past my house and they haven't stopped to get my assisted collection. So then another crew will go back and make the collection. And, I'm not getting any feeling that, I'm getting the feeling that the depots are telling me they're giving the list of assisted collections to the crews that are going out, but I'm not getting any answers as to why the crews aren't making these. And I could speculate, but that would just be speculation.
The comments from members? Shaman?
Yes, I know you're putting lots of hope in the new kit in the cab. Assuming it's a state-of-the-art new technology, then I'm sure it can do a lot of things. We don't have to depend on the driver for the input. Perhaps under the highway code, it would be legal anyway for the driver to be testing any gadgets in the cab. So rather than relying on a driver, it could be the driver's mate and somebody in the cab who could be putting the input. And assuming that this the kit in the cab is geotagged, so you don't have to physically put a thing in. As they drive past something, right? There could be somebody could be just touching the bottom for fly tipped rubbish, and that will be automatically recorded. So there is no need for human interventions and waste time if it can be done through geotagging. And simply, I have a lot of complaints about the repeated complaints about the assisted collections. Now we are told up to now it's happening because they already got a manual list. I assume that in this new kit will alert the crew where the next assisted collection is going to be, so that there'll be no excuse for anybody to miss the assisted collection.
Very short comment from me, then I'll bring in Nikki if she wants to say something. That is that Darren's share, since all this seems to be around waste management, albeit you do need to look at housing repairs where there is also a transformation opportunity. Darren Share has indicated to the Housing and Neighbourhoods O&S Committee that if they wish to have a look at the new technology, then he will arrange for that to happen. I would suggest that we extend that invitation, not just to the members of the Task and Finish Group, but to the members of Coordinating O&S. Then you can see for yourself, Shaman, and you can ask the questions yourself of those who are demonstrating the kit to you. Nikki, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll try and turn my camera on. The network problems. So, councillors, just to provide some assurances, as Councillor Boer has outlined, we did have sessions with waste, although the previous slab in the cab, I'll refer to it as that, to distinguish between what we're moving forward with, was at the crew's discretion. Going forward, kit will not be. So just to provide that assurance, it will be a mandatory solution that's in all cabs, and it will be utilised across depots. What they are taking the time to do is roll that out depot by depot, put my teeth in, to make sure that the crews and staff are adequately trained with the technology, so there's no issues around it being utilised once it's out on the road. So that is happening. We've been assured Montague Street has been the first one to deploy the technology, and that's working well, and they'll be working through the other sites. In response to the automated, in terms of reducing manual intervention, and Councillor, you're quite correct, having the drivers using devices at the wheel is not the way. The kit technology in terms of the crew in-cab technology, it's a hard one to get your teeth around, that one, will be utilised by the agents within the cabs, so not the drivers themselves. They will have the opportunity, some mobility within the technology, to take them out of the cab, to take pictures, to report, and they will be able to do that live and receive live updates where there is 5G, 4G connection, obviously, and Wi-Fi, and that will enable those automated updates to come through. So where there have been miscollections, the technology will enable the service to reroute those, reassign those to crews that are already out, can pick those up as live updates in the technology within the cab, so that they can go and facilitate those. Or if there are reasons as to why, whether those are road blockages, issues getting down a particular street, those can be communicated more effectively back to our residents. I think in response in main to the questions that were posed, that was kind of the assurances that the service have provided. They are working again to look at determine the root cause of miscollection, so looking at the complaints data and how they can really utilise that data more effectively to reduce not only the miscollections but also the assisted collections as well. So that's the assurance that we have, and as a programme, that's what we've been monitoring on the back of the recommendations that we've made to actually make sure that that's implemented. We've been given a target date of December, so the end of this year, for that to be deployed, with a view to reviewing that in the new year, to review its success and then how we can kind of build on the implementation of that technology. I hope I've addressed all questions in the main, as far as I can.
All right. I don't see indications of any other comments. So what I'm simply going to do is move it on and simply ask the committee if they'll agree to recommendations set out in the report. That's 2.1 through to 2.5. Okay. Thank you. That takes us on, and with apologies to those officers who've been sitting in for quite a while, that takes us on to the report on early intervention and prevention. Is it Kalvinda Kohli who's here with us?
It is. Thank you, Chair. And I need to give apologies for Graham Betts as well. He was here just a short while ago, but he's got an urgent hospital appointment which he needs to attend.
Please proceed then. The trouble, I was hoping I was getting the right name here, because the problem where I'm sitting, Kalvinda, is I can't very much see the screen. The screen is small, the typeface is small, and it's impossible to read from where I am. So please proceed with your presentation. But we have a report, so can you please try and keep it as short as possible?
Okay. So apologies, Councillor. How long do I have?
Well, we really want to finish this meeting by 12 if at all possible. We have some other business, albeit not much. So as short a time as you can, please.
Okay, in that case, Councillor, what I'll do is I'll just skip through the pertinent slides. I'm going to assume everybody's got the slides as well. So, and if you haven't, I'll send those through. So, early intervention and prevention, it's a key corporate programme, and it supports the council from moving from a largely transactional crisis response to a response which is far more upstream in terms of earlier interventions and prevention. You've got a definition there. We've deliberately kept it short because there's lots of academic definitions around this, so we didn't want something that could exclude people from the thinking about how the programme could be delivered. So it's very much about how we get to people much earlier and how we stop problems from happening. So in order to do that, we went on a co-design journey with staff across the council. Councillor Jones is the lead for this programme. We engaged with a number of community and VOLOGs as well as public sector agencies to determine what a vision could look like for the early intervention and prevention programme, which you've got there in terms of the vision. It's underpinned by a series of principles in terms of how. And this is very much about focusing on citizens first. It's about delivering multidisciplinary integrated offers. It's about getting it right by using strength-based approaches. So strength-based approaches commonly used within adult social care and children's services. And what they do is they start by working with citizens around a positive model rather than always a deficit model, i.e. how can we help you to help yourself? But we use data to be far more predictive and proactive in terms of reaching out to citizens far earlier, so before they fall into crisis and approach our doors in crisis. We want to be digital first wherever appropriate too, but making sure that we have citizen choice within that, because a number of our citizens, residents, will want to see us face to face, and that's absolutely fine. Many people still want to ring up, and that's absolutely fine as well. But it's about that digital inclusion, skills kit, technology and affordability as well. And this slide just shows the reasons why we're doing it. The cost of living crisis and the pandemic is simply exacerbating existing problems in the city. So we need a very, very different approach as to how we do this. We have set out what it means for citizens, staff and the council, but I'll just focus on citizens for the purpose of this presentation. This is very much about how we deliver holistic services that enable citizens to thrive. So we don't just focus on the presenting problem, but we work through a whole host of issues. So in addition to responding to crisis, responding to need, it's also that relational life piece within communities, things to do, places to go, social networks, because we know how important they are in keeping citizens independent, healthier and happier within communities. So it's all of those things together. Undertook some research, and I just want to share some research findings with you. And this is what we've learned from citizens and staff so far. So, citizens don't always recognise when they're falling into crisis. The shift between those things are so subtle now that it's very, very difficult to always recognise that actually I need some help in this space. There's a reluctance to ask for staff support, and lots of reasons for that. Fear, judgment, distrust. Also, citizens saying to our staff that it's complex trying to access the council services. We actually don't know where to start, where to go. And, the upshot of that is people fall out many times before they land in the right space. And it's that complexity leaves no choice but to come into physical locations to solve people's issues. So in terms of the programme itself, it's something that's been ongoing. It started through dialogue with the previous chief exec, Chris Naylor. The work was then picked up when Deborah Cadman came into place, and it was, you know, the works in terms of a programme of work, it's evolved very, very rapidly now, and we've got another report going to Cabinet in March 2023, and this is very much about focusing around early intervention and prevention directorate. Quite a long journey as to how we reach that conclusion, but I appreciate we're a little bit short for time. But what I did want to do is just start to share some of the learning that we've identified through the accelerators. So we've been working on a Homes and Money Hub accelerator that's in the Northfield area, utilising our existing neighbourhood advice and information service, but just completely flipping that on its head to saying, what could the look like if we were to offer more holistic financial support? What would it look like if our staff were actually engaging with the wider assets within communities to build an offer of support for individuals? Soft launch this week. It's working its way through. It's taken a while to get there. The reason for that is we want our staff and our citizens to be involved in the co-design of that. Also taking a place-based approach around Shard End Library as well, just taking that as a universal safe space to say, what are the additional services we can offer from an early intervention and prevention point of view that will catch people earlier. And what we're making sure is that that all of the work that we're doing in this space is aligned to the cost of living programme, because as you can appreciate, the accelerator around Homes and Money Hub is particularly important. Now, this slide is important because this is the work that we did with our residents and communities. It's very much about, well, what does a good service look like for you? And it's very much about starting with what's strong as opposed to what's wrong, because if you start with the conversation, what's strong, how can we help you to help yourself, what are your needs, but also what are your aspirations, it drives a very different conversation. And what we want to do is deal with the immediate crisis, but have a much holistic conversation with people in terms of their well-being assessment, in terms of education and skills, recognising you won't do all of that in the first appointment, but it's about creating that connection. It's also about how we contact our citizens in the first instance. Lots of evidence showing that rather, if people are ripping up letters, which is on a previous slide, some of the learning from elsewhere is that a lot of people use WhatsApping, and it's showing a 50% success rate in people responding to a WhatsApp message as opposed to responding to a letter. It also improves where, in terms of face-to-face appointments, where people are expected to come to the office with a load of supporting documentation. It's just a nice little reminder before the appointment to say, please bring the following documents with you. But what we do want to do is just make sure that we are building that resilience within communities, so people don't keep coming back to us. So as we were designing this, we asked the question, well, what does it mean for citizens, and what does it mean for staff? So it's about citizens being able to have that strength-based conversation, about staff being able to hold that strength-based conversation, receiving and providing proactive messaging, highly accessible hub-type services, having and providing a single point of contact where that's needed, and being able to provide those recurrent checkups, receiving and providing, and then essentially being part of a resilient and empowered community. To support this, we are taking a place shaping and a place based approach. So again, here's Shard End Library, looking at the wider assets within that community and connecting citizens to those. So what can come into the library, but also how can the library connect to the assets within the area? So with regards to Shard End, there are 60 assets that have been identified, things to do, places to go, and services. And it's about how you bring those things together rather than in a confused space. You bring them together in terms of maximising their overall impact. We're also looking at other areas as well. Northfield, obviously, because we've got a Homes and Money Hub pilot running in that area. But the other area we're very interested in is Erdington, and looking at all of the assets there. Huge amounts of assets in that area. A lot of those are public assets, but from a citizen point of view, very, very confusing in terms of, which is the right front door that I go through in the first instance. So what we're doing at the moment is, and we've got a meeting in about a week's time with Councillor Alden and Councillor Moore to really start to scope out what a different model for Erdington could look like as part of an early intervention and prevention programme. We're also aligning this to the work that we are doing with corporate landlord services as well, because as you can appreciate, there's a number of assets there. We've got our own central building there in terms of where we've got currently staff located, but huge opportunities there, both in terms of the investment that's coming through in terms of the swimming baths, which is going to be developed into an eco hub. Got some assets that aren't doing so well, so got a library with significant costs in terms of its repairs. So, again, the question, is there an opportunity to look at assets, resources and requirements very, very differently in that area, but more importantly, looking at it from a citizen and community point of view. Apologies, I could talk a lot more about that, but I'm conscious of time. So where are we? We're developing the business case around this, focusing on, what will a future EIMP function programme look like? What are the different phases of that? We are rapidly reaching the conclusion it needs to be a directorate within its own right. However, what we can't do is create a siloed directorate. We need to change the culture of the organisation as well. So there's a wider piece in terms of how does it, if we're proposing a directorate, how do the other pieces fit together? What goes in? What's connected? What's influenced? And what doesn't connect? The intention is to take that to cabinet with permissions to proceed into the next phases of the programme. At the moment, we are looking at sort of a Feb, early March cabinet, and then with the first phase of the programme moving on from there. So apologies, that was a very whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Colin. Be assured we do have the slides. They were circulated with the agenda papers, so there's no need to send them on to us. Any comments from members? Lex and Mick, and then we'll conclude on that.
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick comments. Firstly, Calvinda, thank you very much. I know you did a presentation, of course, to councillors earlier in the week as well, and appreciate just how much effort and work that you put into this. Just in terms of taking this forward, I hope that we will be able to get some key and specific measurable KPIs moving forward in the future strategy. And second, of course, we have got emerging challenges. So, for example, right now, we've got, we saw one of the slides yesterday at another council presentation, unemployment, for example, is around 7% at the moment. It is looking to rise around 9-8%. So any resource that comes in doesn't just meet existing challenges, but of course, forecasts and predicts any future challenges. So I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's take the second comment, Mick.
I think what you're looking to do in the terms of a place-based approach is a really positive way to go forward. But I'm thinking in terms of Erdington as a constituency. I think what you're looking to do in Erdington Ward is really positive. But you've got a lot of assets actually there physically, in the same way you've got a lot of assets physically in terms of on Castle Vale. But there are other areas I'm thinking possibly in terms of parts of Pipe Hayes, parts of Birches Green, where you don't have those assets. So the expectation would be that people would gravitate towards either Erdington or Castle Vale. And I'm thinking for people who possibly have got mobility issues, it's the ability to actually to get to one of those locations. And I understand what you're looking to do in terms of WhatsApp, but I'm thinking a lot of my residents or residents I've dealt with previously when the ward makeups were different to what they are now, who don't use WhatsApp and would probably find it a concept that they would actually struggle with. So I think it's a question of how are you going to be looking to deal with the people that are not mobile enough to get to one of the asset areas and are not technologically aware enough and capable enough to deal with the technology approach to things.
and are still going to be stuck in the position, getting the letter, not understanding it, airing it up, and then remaining stuck in that situation. So thank you.
No other member comment? Kalvinda, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, absolutely, Councillor. In terms of the assets within Erdington High Street, Erdington High Street was just given as an example as to, you know, look at all these assets. Could we utilise them very, very differently? In terms of the wider early intervention and prevention programme, absolutely not. We wouldn't be expecting people to traipse across the city, especially if they've got mobility issues. It's about broadening the channels by which people can access council services. We need to think about how we, even if it's for short periods of time in the week, how we bring services into communities, you know, in the same way as we've done with neighbourhood networks. It's about that reach. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, and that's why we need a place shape. People talk about place-based approaches. I'd like to refer to it as place shaping, because once you start to, you know, start with the citizen voice, it looks very, you know, as you say, Councillor, it starts to look very, very different.
Okay.
Can I just come back on it in terms of your comment about neighbourhood network? The Erdington Neighbourhood Network, we're actually looking to get a lot of the social workers more based periodically, doing drop-in sessions at various community bases across the constituency. And I don't think that's been rolled out as much as quickly as it could have been, because there are facilities in other parts of Erdington constituency that could actually be used on a drop-in basis without necessarily undermining what you're looking to do with areas that are more rich asset-wise, and using so for example, in my own ward of Gravelier, we offered actually one facility where people could use on a drop-in basis, and sadly it's not been taken up as quickly as I'd have liked it to have been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely hear your point around social work location. I know, I personally know it's not moved as quickly as we would have liked. There's a whole host of reasons for that, but when I spoke to the head of service last time, the assets that they are accessing across the city, in terms of community assets, be they faith-based locations or voluntary and community sector partners, is gradually increasing. I will find out what's going on with the asset in Gravelly Hill. Councillor, could you give me the name of the asset, please, just so I've got something to go on?
St Chad's Church.
Sorry?
St Chad's Church.
Okay, I'll pick that up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kalvinda. We're simply asked to you were asked to update the committee on the work of the early intervention and prevention programme that you've done, and thank you very much for that. I'm sorry I've had to be cutting this rather shorter than I might have expected. Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With item 10, the scrutiny work programme. If I can deal with the coordinating overview and scrutiny aspect of it to begin with. Following the motion at the council on the 6th of December regarding the Homes for Ukraine scheme, there will be an opportunity to discuss the scope of the scrutiny work with the member for Social Justice, Community Safety and Equalities at the January meeting, and therefore the opportunity to pick up on that Homes for Ukraine scheme at the January meeting. The leader is available to attend the meeting on the 17th of March from 11:30 to 12 o'clock. If you want to bring that about, I will need to confirm that with the leader. It may be we would have to extend the meeting formally through a little beyond 12 o'clock in order to incorporate the leader at the March meeting. And the only other thing I would say is that in the recommendations you had earlier, on the customer services task and finish group. The work of that task and finish group will continue, and we will certainly come back to January in order to update the committee on where we've got to, both with highways, but possibly also on those cultural workshops that I spoke about earlier. And that will lead us into a further phase of the work for that task and finish group to be reported back to this committee. Any comments on the coordinating O&S side of it, Deirdre?
One you just said, I think it was March, where you said the leader couldn't come till 12. Yeah.
Come from 11:30 to 12.
Right, because I was going to suggest, why don't we make it 10:30 to 12:30, that one, or 11 till 1? Should change the time slightly. Would that help?
Happy to do that if members.
Yeah, it works for me.
It's better that way.
We'll have, I can't definitively say yes, Deirdre, we'd have to check on room availability, etc. But the principle, yes. And we'll see whether we can extend it there from 10:30 to 12:30.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Okay. That's anything else on the coordinating side of it?
There's just one issue, and it's dropped off the action, the work progress that got built into the action planner was the report that was suggested around the Elections Act. It was suggested that come back to a committee. It isn't planned into the work programme at the moment. And I just want to ask if you do want that report to come to committee, or I can ask for it to be circulated for information outside of the meeting.
Depends what's coming as the update. Maybe I'll talk to you, Fiona, about it outside of this meeting and see what's the appropriate action to take.
Because there's potentially room on the January agenda if you want to bring it to that meeting, because there's one substantive item.
Let's you and I discuss that.
Just for your information, Jay, are you talking about the Elections Act, which requires people to produce, voters to produce photo ID?
I don't know the detail of the report.
Yeah, but
There was a report that came to this committee last December before I started working here, and it was a request to bring an update on that. So I don't.
All your information.
Well, I'll look at it.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, there was some issue at the Borough Council. The leader of the council put a motion, Labour motion, asking for the repeal of the act. But there was criticism. The act is already a law. So we don't want to go into something which is already law is already in place.
Shaman, let me look at it with Fiona and decide where it is how we should be dealing with this if it's necessary to do so. Roger.
Belt and braces on the hotel train with Councillor Cotter coming on in January, and we'd be assured that we will get a timely written.
Can we be assured what, Roger?
We'll get a timely written report for the meeting, so that we're not just getting a verbal update on this is what's going on, but that we've actually got some sort of response to the debate we had at full council ahead of the meeting.
That is a point we need to be making generally to cabinet members, and that was one of the things I was going to raise under any other business, because sometimes these reports are not very helpful as to providing us with an indication of where things are going, etc.
One of the reasons for suggesting bringing this to starting the discussion in the January meeting is Councillor Cotton was coming to update on his cabinet priorities. My understanding is the discussion's been that could be the start of further work scrutiny might want to do around the Homes for Ukraine, because I don't think that.
We need a report to aid that scoping discussion.
Yes, I think it's the starting information.
Something and have to react at the meeting.
But also, Fiona, I'd be keen to make sure that his cabinet member update is separate from what was decided at full council.
Have those as two separate items on the.
I feel they should, otherwise we would be impacting on the time we would have to talk to the cabinet member on his portfolio.
Yeah.
So that should stand alone, and then separately we should be addressing what was decided at full council.
That be the wish of members?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Nothing else on coordinating, and therefore into Appendix 2, which gives you the programmes for all the other O&S committees. Is there anything that anyone wishes to comment on? No? In which case I would like to move on, and we've got requests for call-in, etc. Nothing there.
I thought you were announcing one.
Yes, well, I might have it in mind at some point or other.
I'll second it.
We'll do it for you, Albert, don't worry.
Okay, moving it on then to other urgent business. I did indicate at the beginning of the meeting, before we started, that is, that I would like a very short discussion. I'm conscious of the time. I'm just getting a bit fed up of having faced, or in this case, it was 292 pages. And if I give you an example of where I'm coming from, if you take the exempt accommodation report, we did not have to have all that in an appendix, all that material, which was the original report, the consultation exercise, etc. they went through. You know, if I go back to my former days in scientific reporting, you used to put a reference. You don't have to do that now. You can simply insert a link, which takes you to that information. I doubt, and this is not being critical of anybody here, but I doubt that members here read all those 292 pages, and that includes me, right? And we've got to cut down on what it is that we have. Equally, and this is not being critical of Smalvinda either, we had that slideshow, and she did not, to her credit, she did not go through every single page of that slideshow. She did, as I'd asked, to try and work through in a more focused way. I think there's an officer culture here when it comes to presenting to committees, and we've got to get them out of that culture. The reports have got to be differently framed. They've got to be much shorter. They've got to be more pertinent. And officers should come to committees assuming that members have read the reports. They'll only read them if they're shorter. And, you know, I just would like to bring a change about because I'm getting, you know, cabinet is ridiculous. You'll have something like 900 odd pages in a cabinet report. You cannot expect members of cabinet to have read through those reports, and they have a collective responsibility. So I can't believe that they're actually taking forward that collective responsibility if they're faced with 900 pages in a single cabinet agenda. Ewan.
I completely agree with something that I do away from here, doing something at the moment, and someone is replying to a legal thing, and the amount of documentation they're replying with is clear to obfuscate to hide the information as what's going on, to make it difficult to find and if people are doing that to try and avoid stuff that they know that they don't want you to find, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying that officers are doing that, but it just proves a point that it's very difficult to find the information that you want to make. And you're absolutely right about cabinet, because we recently checked with the city solicitor that when it says agreed, that's them all, unless they say otherwise, that's them all unanimously accepting that. There was one recently that I don't think has been, the city solicitors released yet, but there was one where a cabinet member got themselves, choosing my words carefully, into a difficulty of a conflict of interest, that they were technically voting on something that they had a conflict of interest on pecuniary, and they didn't read the papers, and so therefore they didn't know it was in there. And so you're absolutely right.
I also think that if you've put aside, say, 40 minutes for an item and an officer spends 30 minutes talking about it, that's cut down the amount of question time to 10 minutes, which you sort of sometimes feel might be deliberate, because it's easier to present than it is perhaps to answer tricky questions. Perhaps I'm being unfair there, but
I'm totally with you on that one as well, Deirdre, because, and if I go back to the task and finish group, what I feel we're doing there is bringing a member perspective into play. And that can only come about when you engage with the members, and you've got to give over the time to allow that to happen. Alex.
Yeah, but of course, context is important. I appreciate officers need to spend a little bit of time, but I think little is the key word. And it's just a request in terms of if we can have time allocations on the agenda. I think it's always helpful just to anticipate how much time that we have, and of course, what officers, how much time they would have.
can I also say, I also think the idea you said about the link is excellent, because then it's easy to find if you do want to see it. Like you don't have to wade through it if you don't.
If you want to go deeper into something, you click on the link. You know, this is what I had to do. If I had a scientific report, I would reference something. If therefore there was a reader of that report and they wanted to go deeper into the work, they'd look up the reference. Technology's moved on, and we can do it rather better now with putting a link into a report. Okay, I may try and get these thoughts communicated wider.
There is some work that we're doing within the scrutiny team to ensure that every report does come with a cover report. So you've got the basic information you need on the cover report, you know, and then a presentation or whatever attached. But I can certainly speak to Christian about the guidance that he's producing around that to include information about using links, not, you know, reams of appendices.
So, overall condensed reports, yeah?
Yeah, there's a verbosity at times which isn't necessary, and I'm not going to entirely pick up the point about if you create an extended report, you might be trying to hide something. Some of us read things in a way where actually we tend to spot what it is we know we're looking for. But you know, if you have to read every word in order to get to the point that is the important point, the longer the report is, the chances are you'll miss it.
Yeah, I mean, in Cabinet, you get 1,000 pages and you ask a question, page 75, why is that? When was that? And then you get an answer back, I need to get back to you. So it's fun to have them read the report themselves.
You know, like we had this report of 296 pages. And along with that, there should be a summary of about 50 to 60 pages so that you can summary one.
I want to create a separate report. I think, you know, if reports can be condensed down to the essentials, if there's detail, a way of thinking or a particular conclusion, you can have a link to that. So if you're interested, you click the link and you get the detail. If you don't, if you accept what is said in the shortened version of the report, then you don't have to click into the link.
I think for the record of the meeting, shall I note in action that we'll take back to Christian the report template? Is there any additional action, Chair, that you want to take in terms of?
Well, just so that you and I and Christian sit down and pick up on the various issues that have been raised here, because I don't want to go through the rest of the year with reports coming to this committee. At least I can change things as far as coordinating O&S is concerned, and hopefully assist with the other O&S committees in the same approach. And then we can perhaps use O&S to demonstrate to the likes of Cabinet they shouldn't be taking 1,000-page reports to Cabinet. Ewan, should they?
Sorry, what was that?
I know you weren't.
I think we were just commenting on the quality of the scrutiny team. We must be no, actually, yeah.
I was just saying, Ewan, that we can at least put our own house in order, and then we can put our own house in front of Cabinet and say they can't be taking 1,000-page reports to Cabinet, can they?
No, very good point. Yeah, we do, because believe it or not, we do actually have to read those things. You know, so yeah.
Okay, that has got me through any other business, unless there is any other urgent business for you to raise. No. Date and time of next meeting. Okay. No, it's not the 9th of December.
I'm sorry, Chair, it's 27th of January. Apologies.
27th of January. Authority chair and officers, the usual motion. Agree that? Thank you. That's it. And apologies for being 15 minutes over time.
Chair.